So last class we were discussing about like what is polymorphism. In that polymorphism, we started looking into the what is overloading and overriding. Okay, so I'll just give the recap of it. So what is overloading? Is like within the same class if we have the same method name with different parameters. Okay, so that is called compile time polymorphism. Okay, so compile time polymorphism, and another one is like compile time polymorphism is called overload. Okay, so here what are the conditions? We should have same class and same method name. Okay, method name with different parameters. So this is called overloading. Okay, so another one is like runtime polymorphism. So we call it as like runtime polymorphism. So it is called overriding. So here everything should be same. So different class. So only I mean like in terms of methods, I'm talking about like it should be same. Name with same parameters. Okay. So this is called overriding. So compile time, it's going to check in the compile time. Runtime is like it's going to check at the runtime when we start executing the application. Okay. So with that, we have looked into some examples like how do we exactly use this method overloading. Okay, so and we started looking into the Varax. So what is Varax? Varax is kind of like whenever we are trying to give. So here I'm not sure like how many arguments that I'm going to pass during the runtime. Okay, so in that case, what we do, we are going to use the Varax. Okay, to demonstrate it simply, I'll just try to recap the things that we have done in the last one. Okay, in the last class. So now you see, I'm trying to see, if we talked about that overloading, right? Overloading. So in that case, we have a method name with one parameter. Okay. So in case like I'm not sure about, like for example, I'm going to take the other method wherein I'm going to have only one parameter at a time. Okay. So int I. So here, remove it. Now you see. When I try to execute this program, so what happens is like it's going to go and check in the runtime. So this is nothing but the compile time. It's going to check whether this particular method is available or not. Okay. So here, what is it doing now? We have one parameter, so it is calling this method. Okay. So let me just add one statement here so that we can differentiate. Okay, between them. One arguments call. Go and execute this. Now you see, it says like one argument call. If I'm not sure like number of arguments that I have, for example, I have some multiple number of arguments. So these many, let me take 1, 2, 3, 4. That will be easy for us. Okay. That's it. Now see. Okay, 7 arguments that I have taken. Okay. So when I execute this, you can see there are like Varax called because this variable arguments is linked similarly. It is kind of like array. So dynamically, it's going to set the size here based on the parameters. Okay. So now you see, I'm going to add only one parameter. Okay. Go and execute this now. So what is happening? It is calling only one argument. Okay. So one parameter argument. So here it is like multiple arguments that we are passing. So it is going to call the multiple, like Varax will be called in this case. Okay. So this is very important, guys, when we are trying to have this multiple set of arguments. I'm not sure like because I cannot take this, right? So I cannot say int j gamma int. See, it's all like likewise I cannot create n number of arguments here based on the values that we are supplying when we are calling that particular method. Okay, so that is the reason why this Varax has been introduced. Okay, now you see what I'm going to do is like I'm putting variable arguments here. Okay, I'll just change the things here itself so that will be easy. Okay, I'm just putting okay. Now it will throw the error. Okay, the reason behind this is like variable argument should be the last parameter. Okay, so this should be the last parameter of this particular method. If, for example, you see now, if you know in that case, you are going to define it as like a particular parameter, but you are not sure like what are the values that I'm going to get as the parameter that I'm going to supply during the runtime. Then what it does is like we have to give this one after this particular parameter. Okay, so it should be the last one. Okay, so it simply says that variable argument should be last one. So it simply says here. So when you say Control S and go to the error, it will define it. The variable arguments type int of method. I'll just increase the size here. See, variable argument type int of the method must be the last parameter. Okay, so this is important. So you need to remember this one. Whenever you are using any variable argument type, then we have to define at the end. Okay, so yeah. Now you see error gone because this particular value will be considered as like this parameter, and the rest of the things will be taken as like a integer. Okay. Now you see what I'm going to do is like I'll just try to create another. As we spoke about the overloading, right? What is overloading? Method name with different parameters. Okay, so we have different set of parameters. Here we don't have any issue, right? Method. Okay, so here you can see I'm giving variable arguments, and here also I'm giving one parameter. After that, variable arguments that I'm giving. But here you see there is an error. Okay, so this is nothing but it says like it's an ambiguity. Okay, the method test is ambiguous of the type variable arguments. The parameters that we are passing suits this set of method, and the same thing will be suiting with this set of method. Okay, both have like, see, this is like integer and this is a variable argument. Here variable argument. Okay, as we discussed about like if you are not sure about number of parameters that we are passing as arguments, in that case what it is doing is like here you can see I'm just setting these parameters here. Okay, setting these parameters which will suit this method and this method. So at the runtime what happens is like it's going to throw the ambiguity error. Okay, so just give me a second. Okay, so this is how we need to check for the ambiguities. Okay, when do we get the ambiguity? Not only in case of this, I'll show you the another example. So here you see, here we have an int and float j. Okay, so here we have a float I. We have different parameters, right? We have different parameters and it should not throw any error here. Okay, now you see we got one error. It says like similar, the ambiguity int is ambiguous of this type or variable arguments. Okay, so it is still causing the error here also. Now what I will do is like I'll remove this and I'll take only one. Now the error is gone. But you see int float int. Okay, now what I'm going to do is like I'm going to take where args. It's only not in case of variable arguments. It's like I'm just giving the general examples. See, now what happened now? It is throwing the ambiguity. It says like is ambiguous because again we have like this one is like taking as a parameter, single parameter, and this is like a multiple parameters here. Okay, so let me do one thing. I'll just try to comment this line and I'll show you when exactly we get the issues. So still we have an issue. What is the reason behind this? Is like, see, method int float is ambiguous. Okay, the reason is like, see, automatic conversion. The value, if you are giving this one as like a 1, okay, that will be converted. This float is like highest value, right? So how exactly this automatic conversion would happen? There is a sequence for that. Okay, so I'll show you what is that sequence. What is the first primitive data type? Byte, short. We have int. After that, we have float, and we have double and long, right? Let us take in this sequence. Now I'm going to take it as like, now in this case, it's like double. So long here float, and we have double. Now you see, int can be converted as like float, double, and long. Okay, so here in this case, if you are trying to give some value as like other than the float, if you are giving some value as like int. Okay, for example, you see now if I give it as like a long. Okay, here also you see that the method int float is ambiguous of the type varabs. Okay, now this is like whatever the value you are trying to give, it will be matching this parameter, and the value that we are giving is like this parameter is also match. That's nothing but automatic conversion would be done when you are trying to send it. Now you see I'm going to pass it as like f. What is happening now? It is specifically going and checking for this set of argument. Now we have a like int and float. Okay, for example, now you see here I've defined the float, right? Now in this case it will not throw because we are not passing any float value here. Okay, so we are passing here int and float value. It's matching this particular method. Now in case if I'm going to give this one as like 1.3f. Okay, so here what it says, now you see you don't have any method, so that is the reason why it is throwing the error. Okay, now I'm going to give the float value here and int value here. So what is happening? It is going and calling this particular method. But in case if you have any method which is like this is integer, what happens is like it will automatically, like if you are giving any value, it will automatically get converted into the float. I mean, this is like in reverse I'm talking. Okay, if you are defining something as like float value and you are giving the integer value here, what happens is like it will also match this particular method, and here also it will match. Okay, I mean to say that whenever you're trying to give some values, okay, so trying to give some values, automatic conversion would be happen internally. So now you see here, I'm defining it as like float, I'm giving the int value. Okay, so it's going to throw the ambiguity because this float value, okay, float value is bigger, the int value is smaller. Okay, so what happens in this case is like float get converted into the like float value. If you are defining something as like 1, and if you are giving the argument as like a float, in this case what happens is like this is bigger and this one is smaller, but this float value can be converted into the integer, so into data type. So that is the reason why now it is throwing the ambiguity. The method test is ambiguous for the type variable arguments. Okay, whatever parameters we are passing, this will match this method and this method. Okay, so this is the reason why it is throwing the ambiguity. It is not only in case of overloading, it happens in the overriding also. Okay, so in overriding, I'll show you how do we exactly happen. Because yeah, in that case also we have like same set of arguments we have to pass, right? So I mean like in the different classes. So there we'll try to see that if ambiguity happens or not. So this is how we'll be looking into the ambiguous. So another thing is like automatic conversion. Now you can see that there's the int and there's the float. Okay, so if you are passing this one as like a int value, and you are passing the other values also int value, then this both things will match. Okay, so that is the reason why it is showing the ambiguity. So this is very important in case of like interview questions. They are going to ask you like, how do you avoid the ambiguity? So to avoid the ambiguity, we have to give the definite values of this particular data type. Okay, so defined values. For example, if you see 1.3f, if I say 13.f, now it's going to call this particular method. Let me put here float. So here, now you see it's not throwing an error because it's like integer. This is a float value. Here it's a 13,2. Okay, both of them are expecting the float value. Okay, so it will only happen in case like if we have integer and any other data type that you are specifying. For example, int. Now say. Now it is calling this method. Okay, so it is not like this has like two defined int values here, and here we have like two defined float values. For example, if you have a float here, and here you have an int here. Okay, so now you see what is happening. It is like it will match this both methods. Okay, so it will be treated as like an integer, and the value that you are giving as like a int value here. But here it is like float. That's nothing but has a bigger size, and you want to put that value into the float. It will match this particular method and it will match this particular method. That's nothing but it is automatically doing the conversion. Okay, this integer value, like whatever we are trying to put, will be fitting into this float and will be fitting into the int. So that is the reason why it is showing the ambiguity. Okay, are you clear about it, guys? Now you see, if I put the defined values, for example, 2.5f, it will not throw any error because it is matching this particular method. Okay. Here also, if you see, if I am going to give 2.5 and 13.3 f comma 2 3 or 3, 3 something. Here now you can see that float int 10. So what it is doing now, it is going and matching this. Okay. So for example, if you have a float here, and in case if you have a double, now I'm going to give. Again, it is causing the same problem. Okay. This will match this float and float double because 3.4 will fit into the double. So now you can see this applicable for the argument. See that it's like in the type argument is not applicable for the argument double. So we are not defining any f values. Okay. So it is little different. I'll just try to change it now. So double, just like a float. So here I'm going to use f. Or here I'm going to use f. That is going to fit into this, and this is going to fit into this. Okay. Let me just, because double has got double and the float has got some defined values here. So if you are trying to see, now you are going to use like 1.13.3 and 3.4. It says like you have to have the double values here. The method double or float is not applicable as the argument is like double. Okay. So by default, it is treating it as like a double. If you want to differentiate, we have to give the, see, now I'm giving it as like f. And you see, again, it is going to throw the same error. Okay. Both of them should be treated as like a float. Otherwise, by default, it will be taking as like a double. But in case of this int c, it is not specifying anything. So for example, 2. See, it is not throwing any error. But I'm going to put int here. And here I'm going to put int. Now you see, it's showing the error. Because the automatic is trying to convert that particular value. That's integer value into the float. Okay, that's nothing but it is automatically trying to convert this value. In that case, it is throwing the ambiguity. Okay, ambiguous of variable. So this integer. So that is the reason why I was trying to explain this. So what is the sequence of this is like short. If you are defining something that can fit into the byte, if you are defining something, so that's nothing but see, whatever we are defining as like a lowest value and we are trying to give the highest data type, then that value get fits into it. Okay. So now you see byte value can fit into short and short value can fit into the int. Okay. Along with the int values. And likewise, the int value can fit into long, double, and float. Okay. It's not only in the case of float double, but in case of long also, it does the same thing. See long. Okay. So here it says like, I'm going to save this. It says like, see, method long, the method test long int is ambiguous of the type variable. Okay. Same program again. So what I'm trying to explain you guys is like, so whenever we have any set of parameters defined like this, okay, any method with this set of parameters defined like this, it will cause the ambiguity because the value that we are passing as like, so now it is int, it will accept int and long values also. Here it will accept only int values in this case. Okay. So now here it will accept int values. Here it is like it will accept int and long values. So that is the reason why it is throwing the error. Okay. So int values can be fit into this. For example, if I say long L, now error is gone. Now it will go and try to find out the method and exact method is available here. It will not cause any error. Now, for example, if you have this 2L defined, okay, here also now it will go and find this particular method. Okay, what is this is like, this is kind of like an automatic conversion. In this automatic conversion, we'll see a lot of ambiguities in this case, if you have any parameters defined in this case. Okay, so this is about like overloading. Do you have any questions on this, guys?
No, Shikhar.
Okay, so now we'll look into the overriding. Okay, so what is overriding? The other thing is like the constructor overriding also we'll discuss, right? We discussed. So now what I'm going to do is like I'll just create some variables here in int a comma b, and here I'm going to create the constructor. Okay, so how do we create the constructor? The simplest way is like right click on this editor and you go to the source, you can see the constructor available using fields. Just select it, click on submit. Okay, so it will generate the constructor. Now we have defined the default constructor. Okay, it is throwing the error. Before that, it was not throwing the error because JVM would create the default constructor. Okay, so now if you started creating the constructor on your own, it will say that boss, it is up to you that you have to create the default constructor also. Okay, so if I now you see what I'm going to do is like say 1 comma 2. Okay, now it is still throwing the error because you started creating constructor. I will not take the responsibility of this creation of constructor. So who says this? JVM is saying that. Okay, so now we have to create the default constructor. Though it does not have any body, you have to just create it. Okay, so that of a comma b. Now I'm going to just create a default constructor. Okay, and leave it. Now the error will be gone. Okay, so if you're not defining, you can remove it. Now you don't have any errors here. Okay, still it is like it is optional. If you don't want to give any body for this, now you see it's going to throw the error. Otherwise, you can remove the object creation for that. So now we have a constructor which is available here. Okay, so now you see how this constructor overloading will be happen. Now I'm going to again create the constructor, and it's asking me to create it. Okay, I'll just create the constructor here. So when I run this program, okay, when I run this program, see, I'm going to give A is A and B is B. Okay, so here I'm trying to execute this program. When I run this, what are the errors that we are getting here? Okay, so this should be the thing. Actually, I'll make L and run as Java application. Now you see what it is doing is like A is 1 and B is 2. Okay, so which constructor is called now? Parameterized constructor is called. Okay, so default constructor is also called, but we did not put anything here. Okay, params constructor. Okay, I'm just going to give this parameter constructor. So here also I'm going to give it. So here I'm going to say that default. Okay, so this is nothing but constructor overloading. So method overloading and constructor overloading. See now, first it will go and call this constructor, and this will go and call the second constructor. Okay, default constructor of that second constructor, because at the runtime it will at the compile time it will check, and at the runtime it's going to call this particular constructor. Okay, it's nothing but overloading that particular constructor. Okay, so this is called constructor overloading. Method overloading is like based on the parameters, it will go and call that particular method. Okay, so what is the condition here? So we should have a same method name. Okay, method name should be same, but we can have the different parameters. Okay, based on those parameters, it's going to call this particular methods at the compile time. Okay, so this is nothing but the method overloading. So in constructor overloading also. Okay, let me take the example of method overriding. Okay, I'll take method overriding as like one class. Let me put this one as like 2 and that one as like 1. Okay, just adding 1 here. So what are the conditions that we talked about method overloading is like, we should have same. So here you can see same class and same method name with different parameters. Okay, so in overriding is like different classes and same method name with same parameters. So here what I'm going to do is like, I'm going to create required model. Okay, so car model. So here I'm going to say it as like, it's a vehicle, define your model. and here I'm putting as like a make. Define your year of making. Okay. Year of making. Okay. So every car, every vehicle will have some models and makings. Okay. So now in method 2, what I'm trying to do is like I'll try to use the extends keywords. Okay. So with the help of extends keyword, we achieve the method overriding. Okay. So now you see we don't have any issues here. But when I try to create the same set of methods, okay. So this is a parent class and this is a child class. Okay. Do you observe anything here? So we get a green symbol here, right? So what it is doing is like that particular method, whatever we have defined here, will be overridden here. Okay. Child class methods are overridden in the parent class methods are overridden in the child class. Okay. So that's nothing but the properties. We are acquiring the properties of parent. And after that, we are overriding that. Okay. Define your model. So I'm defining my model is like some model I'll give. It's like Tata Tiago. Like that. So this is a model of the car. Okay. So let's change this one little bit so that you can understand better. Okay. So I'm taking vehicle class here. Okay. So vehicle will have like all kind of like, which are, very generic. Okay. So now if I take this one as like a Tata. Okay. This is a Tata class and trying to extend the properties of vehicle here. See, vehicle have some make, model, and color, everything. Okay, so this is nothing but we have some generic things which are considered as part of like a vehicle class. Now, if I take Tata, Tata will have this model is like I'm defining the Tata model like this is like Tata Tiago and the make when it is like created or else when it was manufactured is like 2020. Okay, so here I'm going to create. Yeah, I've created the main method. Now I'm going to create the object for this Tata. Okay. So Tata is equals to Tata. I'm creating the object here. So with this object, I'm going to call the method. Okay. Tata dot. See, we have make model. So from where we are getting it, you can see it is coming from the Tata class itself. Okay. So make model. When I execute this, so which class objects will be like which class members will be called? So Tata will be called. Okay, but where did we define this actual methods? We define these actual methods in the vehicle class. Okay, still you can see that what is happening is like now you are trying to override this. Okay, there are some default behavior, and if you want to specifically give some behavior to that particular methods. So in that case, what you are trying to do is like you are going to create the same set of methods here. Those methods will be overriding the existing methods which are there in the parent class. Okay, so now you may ask the questions like what is the use of this? So if for example we have this vehicle and vehicle is like it's a common thing for the all type of vehicles that we have, like it can be car, it can be truck, it can be two-wheeler, okay, four-wheeler or heavy wheeler, whatever it is, like if we call it as like a vehicle. Okay, so but when we differentiate these things like what is the type of vehicle we have, it's a metro, it can be a motorcycle, it can be a car. Within that car we have SUV, XUV, so a lot of variations are there. Okay, but all of them are called vehicles. Okay, so we don't call it's kind of like a if that's like a parent entity. Okay, vehicle is like a parent entity, and what are the different child entities that we have is like, and these vehicles are being designed and developed or manufactured by particular organization. Okay, Tata is taking care of. Likewise, we have a Hyundai. Likewise, we have other Benz or any other companies that they are going to take care of it. Okay, so they have they have some specifications on it. Okay, so make model, so whatever generic things that we have as part of the every vehicle that I'm going to put under this vehicle, and I'm going to override the properties of it. For example, now you see price is like based on the public word price. Okay, so price is not defined for this vehicle. Can have vehicle can have this price, but only thing is like we are looking at make, model, and different manufacturers that we are going to consider as part of like main like different manufacturer even we cannot consider, but make, model, or dimensions and all, whatever we are going to call it as like a common properties. Okay, common properties will be put here. Okay, price and all will be decided by the manufacturer. So here I'm going to put it as like a price. So let us take, I'm going to consider this vehicle as like a 9 lakhs. Okay, 9 lakhs. Okay, so now you see this particular method is not there. This method is specific to this particular child class itself. Okay, so it will not show any kind of overriding symbol here. Okay, so this is like it is showing up this particular method is overridden. Okay, now I'm going to put it as like data dot price. Now what we are trying to achieve is like we'll take the generic methods and we'll be overriding based on our requirements. Okay, so this is like kind of my requirement. So model can be anything. It can be Tata Nexon, Tata Harrier, Tata something. Okay, so it can be Hyundai Venue or any other thing. If you take Mahindra, you will be putting at like Thar, XUV 400, 500, TUV, all these things. These are the different models. Make is like it can be manufactured in 2022, 21, all up to that. Okay, again price variations will be based on the models. So these all things like if I take the same example of Mahindra. Okay, sorry, here so what will change now? You see Mahindra will be changed here. I'm going to put Mahi. Okay, model is like let's say Thar. Or 4x can be of 15 lakhs. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is like to make it as like a common class. I'm going to create all vehicle class. So here instead of creating these things, so what I'm going to do is like I'll just take this properties and I'm going to put it here and I take what I did. I did not create any main method here. And I'm going to go and I'll exclude this. Now what is happening? So this is kind of like showing make, model, and the price of this Tata Tiago. And here also it's going to show like make, model, and price of that particular car. Okay. So what we did is like we have just taken the another class. So in this class we are creating the objects of this Tata class and Mahindra class. Okay. So both of them will have the different properties. Now you can see. But from where these properties are coming? So these properties are coming from the vehicle class. Okay. Where did I override them? I have taken the other class. I am trying to override the properties of that particular vehicle class. This is generic and this is like specific classes that we have defined. And we have created another class so that we can have like we can have number of things right here. We can have Toyota, we can have Hyundai. So all this will have different classes and different specifications. But here I'm going to call them as like a as like kind of one class. From there I'm creating all objects and I'm trying to call them. Okay, so this is called overriding. Okay, so now we'll see some differences here. Okay, some differences. I'll show you. This is very important. What cannot be overridden? Okay, so for example, private void some rules. I'm defining some rules. Okay, so manufacturing rules. So all vehicles should be manufactured in India. Okay. So now you see that because of this globalization, we saw a lot of things like we are trying to create some softwares and we are shipping it to the other countries, right? So they have some requirements and they are giving those requirements and we are building and we are shipping them. Okay. So Tesla is like one good example for us. So Tesla is like it's creating it has some organizations wherein like it has some kind of places where it's going to manufacture and it's going to supply those cars to the different countries. Okay, who has the idea of creating this Tesla cars? Elon Musk. Okay, but Elon Musk is going to have this manufacturing units set in Vietnam and China. From there, he's going to ship it to the different countries. So London, like we have a Germany. So all these countries, they are getting these cars. Okay, so US and all. Okay, and other example is like Apple. Apple is getting manufactured in different countries and getting shipped. Okay, but here I'm setting some rules as like all vehicles should be manufactured in India. Okay, so this cannot be overridden. For example, if we are trying to give it as like a public, so here I'll say that this rule will be overridden by this particular class. Okay, so we are making it as like a private. So when I say private, if I'm going to declare the same class, same rule in the different class, now we cannot override them. Okay, now you see we have, as I spoke about, like we can have same method name with same parameters. Okay, for example, I'm going to give it as like a string rules and take the same thing here in data class. Okay, so now you see why it is not overriding. Why it is not overriding? We cannot override any method which has a private, which is declared as like a private. Another thing is like if I'm declaring this one as like a public final. Okay, I'll put something as like final method. So what it says like public void. Okay, you need to give a value. I'm not passing anything here. Okay. These are rules, guys. Okay, these are final. Okay, rules of overriding. Okay, now you see. I'm going to give the same method name here. It will throw the. I'm just defining it as like see. Now what is this? Cannot override the final method from the vehicle. Okay, so this method is declared as like final. If we are putting private, final, and another method is like static. So this is important question, guys. In interviews, they are going to ask you like what methods we cannot override. Okay, I will say this is going to get us like static. In this case, you don't see any error, but there is a catch here. Okay, in case of static. Okay, so we do not see any symbol here overriding, but here it is showing like this is a error. Okay, it says like this method is defined as like a final, so we cannot override this method. Final methods, private methods, and static methods cannot be overridden. Okay, private is like it is limited to only this class. Okay, only this class. If you are defining this by any method as like private, we cannot access that method outside of the class. Okay, outside of the outside of this particular class. Okay, if you want to access it, you have to call this particular method to the in any of these methods. Okay, so you can pass changing rules. So now what it does is like it's going to. I'm going to put it as like this. Okay, so now you see when I say, so which method? See, now we are calling it in make method. Okay, so if I try to execute this, so when if here you can see that rules have been changed. Okay, so let me just comment this one and I'll tell you how exactly we do need to all the private methods. Okay, so do you see anything here? So it says like main method, but did we catch it anywhere here? So we did not catch it. Okay, let me just do one thing. So here I'm going to put it as like output. Okay, I'm just calling that method. We are anyways printing it. Sorry guys, here what I'm going to do, like I'll take this, not the string, but still we can give the rules. And here I'm going to set some rules. It's changed. we can access that method. I'll show you in a different example also, because here we are trying to override this, right? So for example, if I take this one as like a public void test, that test I'm going to call it as like rules changed. If I see what happens in case of overriding is like, so whatever you are trying to give here, so this will be like, define your year, making this will be gone. So now if you want to call this method, so what we can do is like directly go here and you can create, or else you can just have the object created for this and you can call this test. Okay. Now you see we don't have any issues here. So, but what you see is a rule change. So from where we are trying to call, from where it is coming, so it is coming from the parent class vehicle. Okay, you can create object for that vehicle class or you can directly access it. But how do we access that private members is like we cannot directly access. Okay, we cannot directly access. This is nothing but indirectly we are trying to call this method, private method, into a method which has a public scope. Okay, we'll talk about like what are the access modifiers that we have as part of our Java. Okay, so now for now I don't want to confuse you guys. Just I want to show you like these are the things that we can do as part of our programming. So now let me just go here. Yeah, so it's already deleted. Now you see what are the methods that we cannot, what are the kind of things that we cannot override is like we cannot override private methods and we cannot override final methods which are declared as like final, and we cannot override static methods. Okay, so this is tricky guys. Okay, so if you are trying to override a static method, this is not called overriding, but this is called a method hiding actually. Okay, so this particular implementation, if you are trying to put the same thing here, okay, so if you want to do the different implementation in this class, okay, in this class, you can see there is no symbol which is showing, okay, and it is not throwing any set of error. Okay, but here in this case you see that if you are trying to declare something as like a private, its scope is like only limited to that particular class. Here it will not be accessed and here it will not be accessed. But in static context, it is little different. We don't call it as like a overriding. We are calling it as like method hiding. Okay, this method will be hidden from the method we have declared in the data class. Okay, so both have the same name: public, static, void, method name. So here also we have a public, static, void, method name. But if you want to access this, what do we need to do? We need to call with the help of a class name. But if you are trying to call this private and final with the help of a class name, they cannot be accessed outside of it. Okay, we cannot override them. But in case of static method, as we see that static members will be loaded at the class loading time. Okay, during the class getting loaded. Okay, so that is the reason why static does not require any object. But if you want to access any of these members of this class, there are two things. One is like you can use the extend properties and you can acquire the properties, and you can use the extend keyword and acquire the properties of this particular class. Okay, and other thing is like directly you can create the object and you can call them into this particular classes and you can use it. Okay, if you are not using the extend keywords. Okay, so that is nothing but what is that? Association. Okay, if you want to associate this class with this class, then we have to create object of this class here. Okay, how do we do it? So now you see, let's remove this. It will see it will not throw any error here. Okay, it will not throw any error because this class does not have any relationship with the vehicle class. If you want to create the relationship, then what you can do is like you can just create object for this. Okay. Will it be possible here creating the object? What we need to do, we have to have the main class here. Vehicle equals to okay. So now you call this. How do we access now? See, make model are coming from the vehicle class. But still do you see any other things that can be accessed here? See, final method. Now we can call the final method because final method we are not overriding that final method. We are trying to access it. Okay, so this can be accessed with the object created for this class. Now it's kind of like weekly one. So this is kind of like association. We are not using any kind of extends keyword, but still we are trying to create object for that class in different class and trying to access its members. Okay. Now if you see, if you want to call this one, okay, if you want to call, So here I'm going to call it, but it should be made as like okay, vehicle dot. So this should be made as like a static. Okay. So we already spoke about static. Okay. How can we use the static element? So now you say vehicle dot final. So this is being called here. But are we overriding any properties of this final method or any other method? Okay. Let us take like make dot make model or something. See, are we trying to override any of these methods? No. If you have any parameters passed here, then we can override it. For example, you see we have some string make details. Okay. So here I'm going to put make details. I'll just give make underscore. Now, if you want to override this, what you need to do is like you can just take this one. You're calling here. Now you can override. Okay. So if you say go and execute this particular class here itself, I have to call data to let's say data dot make. Now you see the difference here. Model, sorry, you say model. So there also we should have this model. Okay, so let me change it from here to here. I'm going to give me here. What is happening now? Tata Tiago exit. Okay. So which method is being called now? It is the method which we have in the vehicle class. But what is the point of doing this when we have some features that can easily allow us to override this particular method? Okay. So here also we are doing the same thing, right? So vehicle method, we are trying to call that method in this method, inside this method. Okay. And we are trying to override the whatever we are giving as like a parameter here, that parameter will be taken and it will be passed back again. Okay. So it's not kind of like override, but the thing is like we are trying to rewrite that particular value, that whatever we have. Okay? So instead of doing that, we have a feasibility of using the overriding. Okay. So overriding. So, but what are the different conditions that we have to have when we are trying to override? So method should not be declared as like final, static, and private. Okay. Now you see it's easy, right? So now we can directly override that particular method. Just thing. Okay, so you need to remember these rules, guys. These are very important. Okay, now you see that when you say extends keyword, directly we are trying to override. Okay, so this is about overloading and overriding. So what are the rules that we have in case of overriding? Is like static members, final methods, private methods that cannot be overridden. Okay, so that cannot be overridden. So what are overloading? Same method name with different parameters. There also we see the ambiguity. If we don't have any automatic conversion, in that case we don't see the ambiguity. If you have any automatic conversions defined, so like whatever we have defined here, right? So in case of this, what is that? Shape class. Yeah. Not in shape class, variance. So if you are defining anything kind of like, same method name with different parameters, but parameters should not be like kind of a auto converted parameters. Okay. So if you are trying to define them, so now you have to give specifically during the runtime. Okay. So I mean, like whenever you are trying to execute and pass the parameter, so there you have to be careful with that. So otherwise it will throw the ambiguity. Okay. To avoid this ambiguity, even you can go and change its value. So now it will not throw any error. Okay. So earlier when I see now it's kind of like, this whatever we are putting as like 1,2 will fit into this method and will fit into this method also. Okay. So now you see specifically remove this one and error will be gone. Okay, long value, int value, int value. Now int is like specifically when we are giving int. Now you see it will take int. But in case if you have a long here, so which can accommodate the value what we are passing as like int into this data type, then it will throw the error because it will fit into long, it will fit into int. Okay, so this is like automatically converting its value from long to int. Okay, so that is the reason why it is throwing the ambiguity. So during the runtime, it is like confused now which method you want to call, this one or this one. Okay, so it will ask you specifically, so it will show the ambiguity error. Okay, this is all about like overloading and overriding, guys. So I'll stop it here. Tomorrow we'll be discussing about like abstract classes and interfaces. So with that, we'll be completing our OOPS concepts. Okay. So beforehand that before that, I need to discuss one more thing, guys. So I need to discuss about the access modifiers. So what are access modifiers? I'll just give the heads up here. So if we have a default, public, private, protected. Okay. Along with that, I'll discuss about a few things like final. Why do we use the final? And what happens if we make classes like final, method as like final, variable as like final. Okay. So this final again, I'm going to discuss in case of like interfaces. Interfaces. Okay. So interfaces like different concepts. Interfaces will come into the picture when we are talking about the abstract classes. So first we'll try to complete this access modifiers. Then after I'll jump into these things. Okay. Then during this interfaces, we'll discuss about the final keyword. Why do we need to use a final? And what there are a lot of rules that we have to remember during working on this abstract classes and overriding. Okay. So I'll discuss about few things like how can we, in case of overriding. So this is little out of context, but I'll discuss. It's very important also. Okay. If you have defined here public in the main class. Okay. Now you see what is that? The scope of this is like public. If I'm going to make it as like a default. Okay. So we discussed about one thing, right? So what is that? We should have the same method name and same signature. So what it is doing is like default methods are allowed only in interfaces. Okay. So it is saying the default methods are only allowed. Okay? Only to specify the default. I'll remove this. Now you see do we get any error here? In the data class, we did not get it. But still it is overriding. Okay. The scope of this default can be increased to the public. Okay. But now you see, if I'm making it as like here it is like a default. Okay. Now I'm defining it as like a public. Here I can go and remove this. Now it will throw the error because the reason is like we cannot decrease the scope of this particular. Okay. This is a parent class method. I cannot decrease the scope of it. Okay, so it will say that cannot reduce the visibility of inherited method from the vehicle because the reason is like there it is a public. Now I'm making it as like a default. I cannot do that. Okay, and other thing is like I can make this like a public static, public void, and final. Okay, public. Okay, now you see this method is like public void make. I'm overriding this method and I'm just limiting this method. Now, if I try to extend this class, for example, we have a Tata and further there are different divisions they have created like Tata heavy vehicles, Tata consumer vehicles, consumer vehicles, Tata commercial vehicles or Tata general vehicles. In that case, if I try to extend this class, now this class will be like this particular make will be like final. We made it final, right? We cannot extend this now. So it will throw the error. And we try to extend this class into any other classes. Okay. Further, they have divided. They want to have some commercial vehicles and all these things, right? Tata is not only one company which will manufacture only cars, but they are like different sectors in it. Okay. They manufacture commercial vehicles. They manufacture general purpose vehicles. They manufacture public transported vehicles. So all these things they will manufacture. So further, if they divide like Tata commercial, Tata general, so in that case, if we try to extend this class, this particular method will be like treated as like a final. But where are we getting this method? This method we are getting from the vehicle. Okay, we made it final. Now this method cannot be extended further. Okay, so but now you see that from final to any other child class we cannot extend. Okay, I mean like we cannot change the properties of it. We cannot override that. But whatever method we are getting it from the parent, that we can make it as like a final in the child class. Okay, so this is possible. So these rules will be discussed. These are very important. Okay, here also you can see now you can make it final. If you make it as like static, what happens? For example, if you are creating it as like static, see what happens now? Public static void. The static method cannot be hide the instance of method from the vehicle. So what is happening now? It is not allowing me to make this method as like a static because this method is overriding. Okay, this method is like, this particular method, whatever we are defined as part of method in the vehicle class is overridden in the Tata class. This is nothing but child class. This is parent class. Now I cannot make it as like a static. Its scope will not be made as like, you cannot make that particular method as like static. The reason is like now we are overriding and we are implementing some property here. We can only create the object of this particular class and we can access it. But with this class name, if you try to call it, why can't we make it as like a static? You see, when I make this particular method as like a static and you are trying to override it, and in other classes, if you are trying to create the object of this class and try to access it, okay, that is possible. But if you are trying to access through the class name here and you have a method here, so this method, if you are trying to make it as like a static, what happens is like it will lose its scope. Okay, so there is no point of creating this method and overriding it as like a static. That doesn't make any sense. Okay, so the reason behind overriding is like we want to acquire the properties of parent class and override its behavior. Okay, after overriding, if you make it as like a static, then there is no point of using that particular method as like overriding. Instead of doing that, you can directly create your static methods here in this class, right? So that is the reason why we should not make it as like a static. It will not allow. Okay, so you can override and you can just access it. Okay, you can make it final. You can make it final in the sense I'm overriding it. This final behavior would be the final now. Okay, so vehicle is like I'm taking some patent. For example, vehicle in that vehicle I'm taking the patent of creating the batteries. Okay, so all the vehicles can have the same battery. Okay, same battery. So that is what I'm just creating as like a patent. In that case, what I'm going to do, I'll make it as like a final. Okay, so these are the things, guys. I mean, you need to remember these things. These are very, very small things, but when we are writing the programs, right, it will help you a lot. Okay, I'll stop it here, guys. Again, I'm going to recap. Don't worry about what is this all access modifiers. I'll give the detailed example about it, about each and every modifiers that we are going to use. Okay, and we'll talk about final keyword also. Why do we use a final keyword?
Okay, Shikhar. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for your time. Let's meet tomorrow.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, bye.